Thank you. Where's my where's my? There we go. Thank you very much for being invited to speak today. It's been a real pleasure also listening to all the presentations today and getting to mess around with all the stuff outside. I'm absolutely loving it. As you've been mentioned, my name's Joel Karamath. I run an interaction design course at London College of Communication, UAL. It's interesting that I was asked to do this in the fact that we really don't have a sound-orientated course in any way. In fact, I think one of the things I find interesting about this is because we're completely media agnostic on the course, we very rarely set a media to any of the briefs we write for students, and students find the medium themselves to express their ideas through. And I think one of the things that's resulted in a number of sound-orientated projects from our students is that very often they get a mental block and, I can't think of anything. And I'm like, well, start looking at your own stuff. What do you do? And students always have this, very often have this notion that what they do at home or what they do for fun or what they enjoy can't be work. And I always try and get that out of their head and say very often that's the best work you do. And one of the things, my background's in sort of like cultural studies and film, and one of the things I've often stated to students is that, whatever they're into, whatever movements, whatever interests, whatever fashions, music for me has always been the driving force of popular culture. Whether it's punk, whether it's hip hop and stuff, the visuals of all those things have had an impact. But that music has always been an interest for me in how that's driven popular culture. And it's getting them to realise their own interest in music, how that works as a creative force for them on what is predominantly a visually orientated, graphics-related course. So I've always said to them, as far as I'm concerned, the SL1200 is equally as important as the Apple Mac in terms of defining popular culture and contemporary imagery around there. The other thing I think about our course that's maybe worth mentioning is that I think so many of the courses around the country at the moment, if you've got the term interaction in it, very often people think it's interchangeable with digital. And that's quite right in some cases. But we don't approach it that way. Interaction we have is a much broader notion of that. So I'm just going to have a look at a couple of projects that we've done recently and that have had sound, not necessarily as an initial inspiration on it, but certainly have come out of it in this way. Ironically, having said that, the first piece I will show you is comes exactly from that background. Now, we did a live project with Côte de Rhône. I don't know if people know Côte de Rhône, the largest wine atelier in France. And every year they do a project where they show their new wines. Or do you show new wines? I don't know what you do with new wines. Let people taste their new wines anyway. Display them, right? Let people get drunk, all right? And so these are new, but it usually happens over a weekend. People come along and spit in things and stuff like that and take notes. And yeah, it's really strange. It's such an enjoyable thing, but such a horrible event. But this year they decided actually want to expand it a little bit, and they wanted to have some form of art related to it. So we set a brief to our students that they had to come up with a series of projects related to wine. And I won't show you all this video because it's probably a bit long, but Daichi, our student, came in and did his pitch. He's a Japanese Jamaican, so it's very Japanese in his way, so he's very quiet and stuff. And he just came in and went, "Oh yes, I like the sound of wine when it," and he walked out again. What does that mean? And it's like he just likes the sound of a popping cork. And because of that, he then created this instrument there. And as you can see, all the bottles that are on there have a light sensor on top. When you put your hand over, he used the sound of a popping cork, but he did them to scale. So he's turned the sound of a popping cork into a musical instrument, which was also just...
Is that project made by students? Or?
Yeah, all the students on our course run critical interaction design arts.
And I think what was interesting about that is he again drew upon his sort of like in Japan, he's a DJ and a rapper, and that whole for ages until he got in the third year, he didn't ever think about doing sound projects, and it's just tapping into his own cultural experience. I think really led not only a really interesting project, but it was also really really beautiful as well. And he brought in a number of things, woodwork, learning to cut glass, all sorts of things around that. This project. Called Heartbeat Orchestra came about from a project we do with the Science Museum everywhere. I don't know if people got every last Wednesday the Science Museum do a thing called Lates, which is kind of like a thing for adults. Always really sounds weird when you say it's an adult night, but it's kind of like a thinking and drinking event. So you've got to be 18 to get in, but you can go and fiddle around with stuff in the Science Museum a little bit more. But they always have a theme as well. And the theme for this one was kind of like medicine and science. And these students took it, I think, really stretched the idea of medicine. But what they did was they took the little things on the top of this object that they created were pulse monitors. And what you could do, different people could put their fingers in and get their pulse done, but each pulse controlled the beat of a musical instrument. So depending on how many people were in, had their fingers stuck in the thing, they... I like showing it just because it's a beautiful object as well. Are you timing me, Fred? All right. Saying it's anything you want to listen to, but it was interesting, right? There's the whole idea, and also you got people then standing up, jumping up and down to see if they could change their heart rate, and other people trying to really lower theirs as well. All right, it sounds like one of yours. The visuals that you can see in the middle as well were for each monitor, they gave you what your heartbeat was as well. So you could try and manipulate your own heartbeat by either jumping up or down or slowing down as well. Can you listen to more of that, Fred?
I want a copy. I'm going to download it.
Yeah.
I'll remix it.
So I'm very aware of the time, so I'm going to rush through them as I go. The next piece was for an exhibition we did, which was at the old Hotel Elephant in Elephant Castle, which was an old Victorian warehouse. And one of the things our students did, I think is based upon the sort of David Byrne thing that he did at the Roundhouse, was because of the metal columns, that they're sort of H shape, he put solenoids on each side of them and put light sensors around, so he had lights around. And I think the other interesting thing about this is that sound was the outcome, light was the input. And I think one of the things I think that's really interesting for our course is how they think about the different things that match with each other. They don't think, oh yeah, it's going to be just sound. So when people walked around various points in the building, they cut light sensors. And because of that, then it started to tap the building. So this is just an example of it working, and just really made a nice sound for the building. So that was, he put all the sensors in one place for this, for the testing. But then they were around the exhibition. So as people were walking around, depending on what people were looking at, the taps became very dependent on how many people were in the room, where they were in the room, and everything. It was just a really nice thing. Same student did this as a piece, and he's a French student. He was really interested in how little the English touch each other at lunchtime. He was really intrigued by this as a Frenchman, because him and his friends were always like hugging and kissing and stuff, and we're kind of like, hello, how are you? And so he did a survey, actually, and looking around Europe about how often people touch during lunchtime. Not sexually or anything else, just touch. And, you know, it looked in Scandinavia, people touch each other once or twice in an hour. You know, got down to England, it's 3 times, Germans, 4 or 5, the French were there. It got all the way down to Spain, it was like 15 times in an hour, which probably accounts for why lunch takes so long in Spain. But he then came up with this thing. So the piece, sorry, I didn't show it again, but the piece revolves around 2 galvanic sensors, which drive motors, which spin the cloth which play the guitars. Now the galvanic sensors depends on the amount of conductivity you have between people holding it. So if you're holding hands and you've got good connections, you get 5 people, you can play all the guitars. But it also comes down to the fact that very often if you've got hand cream on or anything, your connections aren't necessarily best with your hands. But so if people are holding it and if they put faces next to each other or touch each other's necks or something, or if they kissed, you could get all the guitars playing all at once. So it was really a way of breaking down sort of like some of the...
It's the music of love.
Yes. Oops, sorry, I played that already. Go away. And one more piece of this. This is, again... This stemmed from a electronics workshop we had when we were building microphones. And this is a Korean student who had quite possibly the softest voice we had ever known, and she'd always like come up and ask you, "Can I do this?" And we're like, "What?" I'm interested in doing that. And it was really, really quiet. So we always used to joke that, you know, you should do the microphone workshop all the time. And one of the things she built was a contact mic. And then we always used to joke that, you know, she was very forthright, though. She was quiet, but really, really forthright. So we always used to say it was like a drop in, like listening to a tap drip. It was really soft, but you would always hear her at some point. She'd always get her point across. So we actually got her to do this, it was suggested it, and then this project ended up where she's made 2 fish bowls, and the bottom container also has a fish bowl, but the water from the top one drips into the bottom, and the contact mic she's made is on the bottom of the fish bowl. So the sound you're hearing is the sound of the dropping water of the thing. And it's a really simple one, but we set it up, and it was just really nice in the space that we kept it in there. And that was really, really simple, because one of the adjectives we always have in our thing is it can be high-tech, low-tech, or sometimes no-tech. Thank you very much.